Hi, I'm Graham Everett. I'm a constructionist, a box maker. I put things together and call it art. For me, art and puberty were simultaneous. Of course, the early art I did was in high school art classes, and I would do detailed drawings, but would always find something, say like I would do a block of wood, all of the grain, that sort of lesson they would do, and then the shadow, and I would take a chunk out of the wood that wasn't taken out of the shadow or vice versa. And I remember my art teacher coming by and saying, you can't just leave it alone, can you? Just get it the way it is. And I was like, well, if I want to get it the way it is, I'll take a picture. The fact that I didn't have beyond high school formal training, what I've done since then is reading books, going to art museums, becoming friends with artists and learning from them. A lot of what I first attempted to do in these constructions was to use up various pieces and so on that I'd collected over the years, and it was almost a cleanup project that then turned into art and continued things. So what I hope to do with the constructs is to take things that in many other cases are just thrown out, to take things that are either dated or have a particular significance and to revitalize them, or to take things that many times people look at and they are very beautiful, but people don't notice the beauty or the weirdness or the uniqueness to them, and to isolate them and put them in certain ways that they show up. Many of the materials, like I say, I collect them over the years. I get lots of people who save things for me, and oh, this will be neat, or I'll take them and I'll decide. And then when I'm out traveling or into stores, I look around for tchotchkes, collectibles, little weird things that are nice. I go shopping at yard sales and find things that people are getting rid of relatively cheap. And then there's times when I'm out looking for something particular. One story I have of a little sword that I had seen in a shop window in Alexandria and wanted to buy it, but the store was closed and didn't get back there till a lot later that day, and it was no longer in the window. I went into the store anyway just to see what else they had, and I found that somebody had moved the sword just at the point I had given up looking for it. And that was an item that I then brought back and built in things around it. There's other times when I'm working on something and I'm out looking and I just happen to see something in the world that, that will fill that space. That will work with those other shapes and those other colors in ways of balance, or just finalizing the thing which is not a statement but which is something that you have to engage in. And that's how I work that sort of stuff. And how did I get into doing this? As I said before, first just a way to gather junk out of the basement, in one sense, but the true sense is just running across items that I would find and like, and then want to present in certain ways, whether they were the exact lines of a chicken bone or something I found along the side of the road that had a sense of time having its way with it, or all sorts of things. In terms of making the boxes, I probably picked the idea up from stuff that Joseph Cornell did, which I really love and appreciate. A lot of it, in terms of the construction, just comes from times I've worked as a construction worker, as a carpenter, as a printer, as somebody putting lots of different things together. Part of what I'm what I'm working on when I'm working on these is to relax, is to have time off from my day job, to get into another world, another way of looking at things, to just feel good about making something that doesn't seem to be causing pain or hurt in the world, but maybe adding a little recognition. Somebody says, oh, that's neat, or look at that, what is that, or isn't that interesting? I mean, I have seen other people look at it and go, what is this junk? But that's their preference. You'll see some things where I will actually glue the paintbrush that I used onto it, and I wasn't quite sure what I was doing when I first started doing that, other than like, oh, I forgot to clean this brush, it's hardened, rather than throw it out, stick it here. But of late I was reading some things that talked about one of the differences in American art. I think this was Fairfield Porter. One of the differences in American art from, say, European art is that American art is concerned with it as labor, as work, so that the thing of then putting the tools of that labor into the work actually does fit into sort of an American trope. For example, many times I may use timepieces in the constructs, and a friend of mine had told me once that American clockmakers, since like the mid-19th century, set their clocks at 7:22, which was the time in the morning that Abraham Lincoln died after being shot in Ford's Theater. So I do that just as one sense as a quirk, in another sense as a nod to this is American art, and I'm somebody who's making art in America, and I'm interested and concerned with that, even if it's a construct. And we're down here in my basement studio, also where I write and read and paint. What I've done here in terms of setting up is to give myself various stations at which to work at, and the original idea was to set up the various media, whether the spray paint, the stencils, and then the markers and rubber stamps and the various things that I use, so that each place would have its station. It never quite developed to that. Even the studio itself was set up that this is painting, the constructs, the collages, the even some design stuff that I still do in terms of graphic design, and then my writing and my library of books that I collect and look at occasionally, so that when I'm working down here I may come down and have something I do on a painting and then get to a certain impasse, or not sure what I'm going to do next, and I'll start, you know, fooling around with some of these things, or just taking some stuff. I do a lot of experimenting with things on cardboard. I also use those for backs of postcards, which the mail art, MAIL movement, mail art movement, started years ago by Ray Johnson, and I came into it through the poet and artist Jim Tyak, and have since then I send out hundreds of postcards a year, things that I make and people that I correspond with, and I probably get that many back from different people. I do get interesting feedback from the people in the post office, and I bring things in. It seems to break up their monotonous day. Maybe that's a way to look at art too, these constructs, that they break up the monotony. It's what I try to do with art, to get to that it's not the moment, it's the fact that you realize that this is a moment. Other thing in terms of, say, the constructs, you know, not only seeing Joseph Cornell's stuff and many other people today. I don't even know their names, but I see lots of constructs around. I guess that's one of the things I get out of my studio time, is a certain mindlessness, a meditative relaxing where the maker disappears and it's the box that becomes the focus of the moment. And it's appearing. And yeah, I'm sure there's influences and inputs from whoever I am and that sort of thing. But I try to leave that out of the construction. Or better yet, let the construction itself leave that out. The other thing that I've gotten into, and we've certainly seen some of them, is not the smaller boxes or even the Altoid tins, which have become very popular for people to fill with things, sentimental, other value, but taking on bigger boxes, or also in the sense of the construction, working on a typical sort of canvas and then gluing things to the actual canvas. At first, what I thought was, well, I'm doing this because I lack the talent to paint that sort of stuff in ways that it would then look like it was glued on. But it just became a thing of furthering the reality of the painting or the construction, that it was something that was made, if purposefully, not always clear for what purpose, but nonetheless clear that it's not something that existed on its own. And that's part of the other thing. I don't like to go out and spend lots of money on the stuff, mainly because I don't have it, yet at the same time I like to find things that then have value, whether they're rare or people have never seen them in that context. Although there's certainly things that I just pick up in stores, little tourist items and things like that. I also look for, when I'm doing the collages or in some of these pieces, the various paper documents of our daily interactions, things that then have date and time and place on them that lock it into time and so on. Part of the thing with the boxes that I was concerned with, or better interested in, was that in the act of building them there was lots of handling of them. So rather than something that would be displayed, I wanted something that had to be handled, had to be opened, had to be turned and held, and so the weight is important. I'll make a box that looks very light and have it very heavy so that one's expectations are thrown off and immediately you've got something you have to contend with. What is this? What am I supposed to do with it? Is part of the problem, say, of displaying them, and something that I'm working on in the series with the high-tech caskets, is ones that can sit there and all you really have to do is lift the lid and set it down, or prop it up like one would do with a casket itself. I have had shows where things are displayed in cabinets. I remember overhearing some people, they didn't know I was the artist, but there was a young kid with his mother and he was looking at a couple of the boxes and he looked in and he goes, "Ooh, that looks like blood." And his mother goes, "Oh no, that's really red paint." And he just looks up at his mother and he goes, "Yeah, but he wanted it to look like blood. He wanted it to look like blood." This piece here as a construct is first off an appropriation. The background is the cover from Bob Dylan's Basement Tapes. A friend of mine was a printer and got one of them before they actually got a lot, but passed one on to me before it got folded into the album cover itself. And what I worked off of was whoever had done the cover, adding more people, and of course then design and so on. So taking almost a cultural fetish and something that had sacred status and violating it or adding to it, and then continuing the sort of defaming with the broken or deconstructed frame, which really just started out because I had pieces of this left over from doing a real construction job. So this piece was back in the early 90s, late 80s for me, and then the other thing was a beginning piece that I started adding coinage on, usually foreign coinage, and it was my little joke of saying to people, well, of course art is worth something. Here, this adds up to about $2.30, and this is called If Eve Had Counted to 10, and it was not only one of the first pieces were intentionally to frame, cracking a little bit here over time, and following one of the early American primer books of the numbers and alphabet around. But this one here, called American Verticals, in a whole series of pieces that I did for a show that I never got to happen, called Breaking the Rules in America. And I had, of course, lots of red, white, and blue, and then lots of the icons of the national character. And again, there's your 7:22 on the clock, and then lots of Washington Monument, things that I picked up being a tourist. This piece, I don't remember where I got it from, but what's interesting, it has the appearance of a Scrabble tile, but it's a number. That is, it's not a Scrabble tile. Again, something to look at, sort of the various things that one stands up for or against in America. This piece here is an early piece, again from some of the old printing equipment that I used. This thing here, before I painted the box, was all plain pine, and this is what's known as a doodad box, and some of the doodads and so on from the old typesetting equipment, playing on the miniature, the juxtaposition of things that don't belong together, and yet when they are put together show us other possibilities and relationships. This is a piece I did about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, using a lot of computer parts and working things and a Mardi Gras mask. Matter of fact, this was one of those pieces that I had laid out, and I was down in New Orleans for the first time, and I saw those little cheap little masks. Those go for like $1.40 a piece, and I saw that particular one, and I knew right where it was going in the piece, and that would finish the piece off. What I'm working on in there is playing on a box within a box. Some sort of restriction is, for me anyway, there's a movement this way and a sense of floats and things on parade. I was down in New Orleans before the Mardi Gras Day Parade, so I guess I was working on a sort of dreamlike sense of what the parade would look like from the air going through the streets and so on. These pieces over here, this was in the American series, the Breaking the Rules in America. It's sort of like a relief set in there with the toy soldiers and horses and wahinis and stars and monkeys and jet planes. And this is a this is an old wooden silverware tray. And this one here, very early construction. Something to do with the beast within, and just various pieces that I had around and played around into a sort of working off a painting into at this stage I think I was trying to work out of boxes, so create picture frames and things like that. This is a playful piece from using an old shell from a monitor, and then a piece of cardboard that I had worked certain designs on, and then pieces of a bowl, a dish that I had dropped. This goes back into the 80s, 81, 82. I started putting that together, and then years later, the background and the sort of tapestry, and then years after that, I found this frame with a little bit of depth in it, and that's called a misspent youth. This piece over here was originally a game board that my son had. He had the good or bad fortune, we're not sure, of growing up in a household where if he left his toys around, Dad glued them into things. And I took his old game board, which wasn't a very good game to begin with. We never really got into it. And spray painted and then worked things around. Somebody had given me a globe, you know, with the little latitude thing around it. This is a piece called the 3 Levels of Domesticity, and it was actually, I've done maybe a half a dozen pieces of using things that are commercially made. This is obviously a piece here, a spice rack, and again taking something ordinary every day and bejeweling it, bedecking it. Lots of artists have argued you can take a piece of junk, but if you frame it up nice or put it in a nice museum, people are going to look at it as art. So I'm always concerned with that line that I'm walking. What I really want to do is start this box here, but these I want to get in to this box. As I was thinking on this was to get different layers. So the way I do that is build this up with some boards underneath. I want to get a little glue on these. There's the height I was talking about. Get a little of this great stuff in here. And then for pressure, and we'll let that guy dry a little bit. This one we want to get up in the air in the box. Beautiful pattern there, look at that. And this guy I want to just get him down flat. This piece has been around a little while. We'll get that in. Let that one hold. And this one I wanted floating, or the appearance of floating. And this one, the effect that I like with these, that have this remnant of the computer stuff, the plug-in. I like to give them the impression that they're jammed right up into the wood. So I put a little bit of glue in that. I get this in there while I move the other one around. So this is a favorite, the little happy face from comedy and drama, a little moon face. The eye, or the person looking at it, is given little rewards by paying a little more attention to it. Things that are really out of place and yet seem to have found a place amongst a world that they never knew about. And here's, you know, one of the sort of decisions that one is always faced with. Do I make that a 6 or do I make it a 9? And usually for me the final decision is the actual doing. I think I'm just in a number 9 mood. Get him in like that. And the guide. See what I want. And down just a little bit. There we go. And then we'll see how it looks. Get this empty space up here that I don't like too much. These are little skulls that have been carved into bead rather roughly, rather quick. Get them to sit in there perhaps. After all, this is a casket series. Anyway, sometimes I spend days looking for the right skull. Part of my thing here is I have to watch, make sure the cap sits down with the things I'm putting in. There's a constant checking.
You're just another old guy, hitting the early bird before the crowd.
Somebody will come along 100 years from now and have a whole dissertation on why that F is there. But we know it was just a shake of the dice. It's gold.
A hand cuts the womb, stars and moons float out, and waves in air and water have their ways with us. Careless and cruel dusts of atomic tests out west drift over us in a Tuesday to Thursday rain. Let those schemes for tomorrow turn to